Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We're going to start, inshallah, our special session about the life and journeys and works and the legacy of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. So there's a poem attributed to him. It says, حاصل عمرم سه تا خندیش نیست. خام بودم، پخته شدم، سوختم. My life can be summed up in three words. I was raw, and I was cooked, and then I burnt. But what actually appears in Divan Shams is سوختم و سوختم و سوختم. I burnt. So this is a life of burning, and it's the burning of love. As Maulana says, در عشق او خود او شدم. Through his love, I became him. I became one with the beloved. We're going to talk a little bit about the sources. The question is, how do we know what happened 800 years ago? So, fortunately for Maulana, it's not as difficult as it is for a lot of other Sufi masters and Sufi teachers. We do have reliable sources, time machines, if you like. The most reliable source, obviously, is Maulana's own works. So, what Maulana says in Fihi Ma Fihi, for example, in his letters, for example, or in his sermons, for example, all of that give us some information about Maulana Rumi's life. Less so in the Masnavi, but also in the Masnavi. So a lot of the cities he refers to in the Masnavi, for example, he's been to those cities. Then the second source we do have is the Walad Nama, which is written by Maulana's son, Sultan Walad, who was a first-hand witness of many things that happened. And we also have two additional sources. So we've got the journals of Sepah Salar. It's called Risaleh Sepah Salar. And Freydun Sepah Salar was a disciple of Maulana who stayed by his side for 40 years. And he wrote a relatively short biography of Maulana. And then you have the famous biography of Aflaki. It's called Manaqib al-Arifin. And that biography is longer, and I mean, it's the Sufi genre, it's hagiography, so it contains facts, but it also contains legends and spiritual legends about Maulana's life. So yeah, that was a quick word about sources. What's in a name? So Maulana's name, as you all know, many people in this time period, they're called Muhammad. So Muhammad doesn't help us much, but a lot of names are also double names, like Jalaluddin Muhammad or Shamsuddin Muhammad in case of Shams-e Tabrizi. So Maulana's name is Jalaluddin Muhammad, and Jalaluddin is the glory of faith, or the majesty of faith, the majesty of religion. And more commonly, is known as, for us, as Maulana, or in Persian, Khudavandagar, or the Arabic Maulana, which means our master, but Maula also has that connotation of love. Wali is the friend, is the beloved. So it's our master, our teacher, but also our beloved. Maulana himself says in the Masnavi, Kist Maula anke azabat kane. Who is your Maula? Is the one who frees you. Band raqiyat zapayat va kane, and unties your shackles. That person is your Maula. And when he comments on the hadith that says, that the Prophet ﷺ says about Imam Ali, whoever I am his Mawla, Ali is his Mawla. So it says Mawla is the one who frees you. So it's interesting. The name that he became famous by is Maulana. And the Wali is also the name of God that he shares. The humans can also be Wali, and Allah is also our Wali, or our Mawla. So he's known as Balkhi because he was from Balkh, from the region of Balkh. Now, obviously, when he was in Balkh, he wouldn't be known as Balkhi because everyone in Balkh is Balkhi. But when he moved to what is called Rum, he would be called Balkhi. But then, of course, to everyone else, he was called Rumi because he chose to live, and he lived most of his life in the land of Rum, which is the eastern and central part of what is today Turkey. You know, Rome. When Muslims talk about Rome, uh, they do not mean Italy. You know, they mean the eastern, the Byzantine Empire. So the eastern part of that, so which is modern day Turkey, or central part and eastern part of modern day Turkey, Anatolia, basically. So that's why he became known as Rumi. So as for his birthplace and his birth date, so he was born in 1207 Common Era, or 604 Hijra, from the Hijra of the Prophet Muhammad, in Balkh, in the province of Balkh, or the city of Balkh in present-day Afghanistan. Or there is another theory that says it's modern historians who found out that possibly because Maulana's father refers to a city called Vakhsh, and he was there, he lived there. In his diaries, he refers to Vakhsh. And Maulana himself in the Masnavi, a couple of times, he refers to Vakhsh. Like, how can you go into Vakhsh in one instant? And people think this is too random, you know, this little city, Vakhsh. So probably Maulana was from Vakhsh. But because Vakhsh belonged to the greater Balkh region, and because the family was there for work, and then they would go back to Balkh, and because Balkh was more famous, so they would call themselves Balkhi, but actually Jalaluddin Maulana was born in Vakhsh, which is actually in present-day Tajikistan. And thank you, Kenzajan, for sending me these photos. It's from, if I'm not mistaken, from the Khanaqah of Maulana's father, Bahauddin, and possibly a place where Maulana himself could have was born, or could have been born. Kenzajan, you were there actually, right? You went there.
Yeah, actually, when there was NATO, we couldn't go because they had put a big, huge wall around it, and they used it as a bunker. Thank you, NATO. And another thing, which this is where you understand that they never understood the people of Afghanistan. They said that they had put this big wall around it because they were afraid people will actually bomb the place. When even the Talib, and they wouldn't do that to Rumi's birthplace, because this is known as Rumi's birthplace and the Khanaqah of his father. And then when NATO left, there was no road, there was nothing. So I had never really seen it. And then when they left, the Turkish government stepped in. So they put the cover that you now see, you know, to cover the whole area. They're digging, trying to restoration would be really hard because it's really in shatters. But they did the road, and now people can visit it. It's just in what is today the outskirts of Balkh. So let's hope they do some restoration and people go visit. And it's kind of, for me, it was kind of special. I don't know if he was born exactly there or not, but at least he went around there. And what I liked also, and maybe later you're going to show his tomb in Konya. Here for me, there's a humility and a humbleness that I liked, that in Konya you definitely don't see, with all the gold around his coffin. So yeah, these were taken a year and a half ago, more or less.
It's close to Mazar Sharif, right?
Yeah, Balkh is about 40 minutes by car. And if people don't know, Balkh, well, Ibn Sina was born there, Avicenna's. Balkh has a very important rampart and old castles and old thing. It was a very important center of Buddhism and Zoroastrianism before Islam. It took a long time for Islam to actually settle in that area of Afghanistan because of all the Buddhist and Zoroastrian inheritance. Some was forced, some was not, but a lot of it was forced conversion. And there are accounts about it to today, which is kind of interesting. Um, so, and it has been pillaged by the British, by then NATO, and then the local population, because there are many artifacts from Balkh. And Balkh is also known in Arabic as al Medina, because it's the longest living city in the world. It's 3,500 years old, whereas Damascus, let's say, is 1,500. Jerusalem is about 1,500 as well. So this is a really old city.
So Maulana's homeland, there is a lot of fights happening on where Maulana was from, in a sense, which passport he had, that kind of that kind of argument. So you see that more often among people who have no interest in what Maulana himself has to say. So yeah, I mean, the Tajiks will say, oh, he was probably born in Vakhsh, so he is Tajik, and the Afghans will say, oh, he was from Balkh, and Balkh is in Afghanistan, so he belongs to the Afghans. Iranians will say, hang on a minute, in 13th century, where Maulana was there, you didn't have Afghanistan, you didn't have these borders, it was all Persia, it was all Iran, so he belongs to Iran. The Turks will say, oh, he spent much of his life in what is today Turkey. He left his tariqa, his spiritual um, legacy there in Turkey, so he belongs to Turkey, and so on and so forth. But Maulana himself, what does he say? Maulana himself says, my homeland is not this world. And when he comments on the hadith of the Prophet, loving your homeland is part of faith, Maulana says, your homeland is not Egypt, it's not Iraq, it's not Syria. An Vatan Shahri Kanra Nam Nist. Your homeland is a nameless city. Your homeland is the city that has no name because it cannot be expressed in words. That's the spiritual word. And he says this body itself is a cage. This bodily existence, it's a temporary cage for the soul. So why does it matter? This side of the cage or that side of the cage? So ultimately, he says, my watan, my true homeland is the remembrance of God. It's dhikrullah. And any heart that's attached to God, any heart that remembers God, any heart that loves God and longs for God, that heart is my compatriot. So that is ultimately, if you ask Maulana himself, that's what he will say. And, as a matter of fact, these national borders didn't exist anyway in Maulana's time. So people didn't have that conception of identifying with a nation state, in a sense. They would identify with a town, with the region they were born in, unless they moved to a different area. Like, for example, Maulana, when he moved from Balkh, for example, to Rum, then he would know, oh, I'm from this. Or people who moved from, let's say, the Persia to India, and then they would, like, otherwise, that was not the main thing anyway. So we're going to start the story in Balkh, in the region of Balkh. Maulana's father, Bahauddin Walad, is called the Sultan of Scholars, Sultan al-Ulama. And he's a great scholar, a great preacher, and man of tasawwuf. He is into tasawwuf. He has students. Um, he was well. He had read the works of Ghazali, both Ghazalis. So, and he criticized dry philosophy and rationalism, and which was getting quite popular in Balkh. And in Balkh, you had that tendency. So you had Fakhruddin Razi and people who were attached to his way of thinking, and you had people who were more inclined towards tasawwuf, inclined towards the heart. And Maulana's father was inclined towards that. He was inclined towards the spiritual world and towards the experience, Balkh, tasting the reality for yourself. And he has a book called Ma'arif, which is in a sense a spiritual diary. And in this, he writes about his dreams, his visions, and his experiences, his spiritual experiences. And unfortunately, it hasn't been properly translated into English, but the Persian text is really extraordinary. And Maulana himself was really attached to this book. And oftentimes, all night, as Maulana's wife says in one of the biographies, it says, all night he would stand because he wouldn't even read it sitting, or because of the respect he had for his father, he would stand and read his father's book. So his father had a lot of tensions and rivalries. He was with people who were close to Fakhruddin Razi and the Sultan of Balkh. And he was criticizing the Sultan of Balkh for many years. Now, Fakhruddin Razi had a very different take. His path was more the path of reasoning, all right? And this is something that Maulana criticizes. So Maulana criticizes, he says, you cannot reach God with your intellect. It's like walking with a stick or with clutches. You will fall. The intellect will take you to somewhere, but it's not stable. You need love. You need love. Love is the driver. Love is the sun that will take you to your destination, to light, to warmth. Now, because of these rivalries, because of these tensions, political and so on, Bahauddin decides that the best thing would be for him and his family to move from Balkh forever. So he leaves Balkh for good. And he sets out on a long journey, and they all flee. And of course, this is also the time of the Mongols. So the Mongols are invading Muslim cities one after the other, razing each city to the ground and turning this great civilization, the greatest civilization on earth in this time period, they're turning it to ash, burning libraries, burning cities, and so on. So as this family is traveling, the Mongols are following them. So when they arrive, for example, in Neyshabur, the Mongols have already destroyed Balkh, and this whole city is razed to the ground, and so on. So they move city after city, all the greatest cities of Persia, they all one after the other destroyed. And that's just a map of the 13th century. So I'm um, I'm guessing where should I put Balkh? Somewhere around here, right? So they're going all the way, and that's Konya or Rome. It's all the way here. So they're going all the way. So they pass through what is modern day Iran to Iraq, and then they go to make the pilgrimage. So they go to Mecca, Medina, and then they come to Syria and then to Rome. So it's a really long journey. I put it on Google Maps. It's a 90-hour drive. Not sure how long it took them. So the first, they do stop at Neyshabur, at the old city of Neyshabur, and as they arrive in Neyshabur, they meet the great, according to the tradition, they meet the great poet and spiritual master Attar, Fariduddin Attar. He's the one who wrote the Conference of the Birds, Mantiq al-Tayr, and Tadkirat al-Awliya, the Chronicle of the Saints, or Memories of the Saints. And it is said that in Nishabur, Attar gives the young Maulana, so Jalaluddin, who is probably a teenage boy at this time, he gives him a copy of his Asrar Name, Book of Mysteries, Asrar Name. And he says to his father, زود باشد که این پسر تو آتش در سوختگان عالم زند. Soon this son of yours will kindle a fire to the hearts of men, to the lovers of God, the lovers of God, men and women of God. So he saw that greatness in Maulana. And of course, Maulana is very much influenced by Attar and also by Sana'i. And these are the poets who used Persian poetry for spirituality. Instead of earlier poets who used their poetry just for praising kings and getting coins, but people like Sana'i, people like Attar, their poetry was all wisdom. Their poetry was spirituality. So Maulana uses their language, and we all we shouldn't ignore the fact that Maulana doesn't come alone. He's part of a mountain range. He's part of a tradition. So his poetry is part of a tradition. His tasawwuf is part of a tradition. It's great mountains. Even Mount Everest doesn't come alone. It's always in a mountain range. It's always in a caravan. As Maulana says, travel with a caravan. زنهار سفر با قافله کن. Do not travel alone, travel with a caravan. And yeah, that famous poem, Attar Ruh بود, he was the soul. Sana'i do chashmo, and Sana'i was his two eyes. So the vision, the basira in Sana'i. And I came following Sana'i and Attar. And yeah, throughout the journey, they stop by different cities. And many of these cities are named in the Masnavi. So Maulana mentions these cities. And he was there. He, as a teenager, as a young man, he noticed what he saw in different places, in Neshabur, in Sabzawar, in Ray, in Baghdad. He has a lot of poems mentioning Baghdad, for example. And yes, he arrives in Baghdad, which was the seat of the Islamic Caliphate, of the Abbasid Caliphate. And in Maulana's own lifetime, this caliphate comes to an end because of the Mongol invasion, and this beautiful city is destroyed. But Maulana describes Baghdad so beautifully. And for him, Baghdad is a symbol of divine gift. Even the name Baghdad is Persian. It means God's gift. Bakh is God in Persian. Dad is gift. Which is the throne of divine love. So imagine divine love as a king. The throne is Baghdad. Just like Baghdad was the seat of the caliphate in Maulana's time. It is a hidden Baghdad, Baghdad and Nahani, and the hidden gifts of God. And from that, Dil becomes Hamadan. And it's a pun, and it's one of Maulana's puns. Hamadan also means knowing everything. Hamadan, it's like you know everything. So this hidden Baghdad makes the heart a Hamadan. And yeah, it is said that when this caravan entered Baghdad, they asked the people in the caravan, where are you from? Where are you going? And Bahauddin, which is Maulana's father, he says, we are from God, we return to God, and there is no power or strength except by God. من الله وإلى الله ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. از لامکان میاییم و به لامکان میرویم. We come from the placeless and we go to the placeless. And then when Shahabuddin Sohrawardi, who was this great Sufi master in Baghdad, he heard this, he said this can be no one other than Bahauddin Walad, other than Bahauddin of Balkh. So the family stays in Baghdad for a few years. It is said that they also criticized the Khalifa. So there was also some tension with the people in Baghdad and the Khalifa. So they had to flee again. So they had to move again from Baghdad. They continued their journey to what is today Turkey. So the city of Laranda, it is called Karaman in modern day Turkey. And in Maulana's time, this would be called Rome. So, when the Seljuks conquered the old Byzantine Empire, they didn't change the name. The name was always called Rome. So it was a place that was relatively safe from the Mongol invasion. And it was a cosmopolitan place. It was multicultural. So you had Persians there, you had Armenians, you had Turks, you had obviously the inhabitants of the Rome region. They were Greek. They were Greek-speaking people. So you had all these different languages, different religions. It's a really multicultural city. And again, you see that in Maulana's poetry as well. So, like in the four beggars were arguing, and there are four different languages. So Maulana was aware of all these different languages that was that was spoken in his city in Rome. And during this time, his mother, Mu'mina Khatun, passes away, and also his younger brother, Alauddin, passes away in Laranda. And Maulana names one of his sons after his brother. So Alauddin is also the name of one of Maulana's sons. Maulana's household. Now, his first marriage was to Gohar Khatun, who was the daughter of a friend, Lalai Samarkandi, Haja Lalai Samarkandi. And from this marriage, he has two sons. He has Sultan Walad, who is Rumi's biographer and the one who wrote the Walad Nama and so on, and in a sense, his spiritual successor, and also Alauddin, so two sons from his first marriage. And then he married Kira Khatun, who was likely originally Greek. Her name is Greek, right? So Kira is lady in Greek. She was likely a convert from Greek Christianity. And from the second marriage, he has again two children, Emir Alim and Malika Khatun. And there's Kimia Khatun, who is Kira's daughter, and later she's married to Shams-e Tabrizi.
Just thinking regarding the travels or the movement of his father, Bahauddin, that in the Balkh where he had the problems, as you mentioned with Fakhruddin Razi, obviously, like he that made him move, and that was a big blessing in the sense that before because he had moved in time before everything was destroyed, and so those problems were a great blessing, and he had to move from there, and then he went to Baghdad, where also he had problems. Like obviously that shows an angle of his life which I was not aware of. Like he has criticized the Sultan or Khalifa. Like that seems very interesting in the sense that a refugee who's
Uh-huh.
like nowadays, like everyone goes to a place and tries to think of their own safety. Only a person who goes from God from no place to no place can have the courage to criticize
Uh-huh.
Khalifa who's so in such a big empire. I don't know the details of that, but anyway, that also was providential in that it was to the next step of his journey. There was like, and finally, where he reached, all this contributed, all the problems contributed to his great like journey, and these problems are really something of great blessings. That was what came to my mind.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, absolutely. So thanks to Fakhruddin Razi and the Sultan of Balkh, so that they fled from Balkh. Otherwise, we wouldn't have Maulana.
I just wanted to say, can you read the poem that he has written for his wife, Gauhar Khatun? I want to read that.
Oh yes, this is from the Masnavi. Yes, جلوه حق است او معشوق نیست خالق است او گوییا مخلوق نیست. So she is a
Wow.
ray of God. She's not a mere beloved. She is a creator. You might say that she's not created. So Maulana says you can see the creator in woman. You can see the creator in your wife. So that's seeing the beloved in seeing the heavenly beloved in the earthly beloved.
Yes, the early life of Maulana, I heard a different version before that. When he was in Balkh, obviously, Bahauddin, Sheikh Bahauddin, the Sultan of known as Sultan. So the Khwazam Shah, the ruler of the Balkh area at the time, called him in his court, and he said, "I heard that you are a sultan, and I'm also a sultan." So Bahauddin Walad said that, "Yes, I'm the sultan of the hearts, and you are sultan of the land." So
Uh-huh,
Khwarizm Shah said, "Yeah, only one sultan can stay on this land." As a
uh-huh,
result of that thing, Bahauddin Walad left Balkh, with 300 of his followers
Mhm.
or people with him, and then moved to Nishapur. So this is the version I have heard.
You know, there are different versions of it in Manaqib al-Arifin. So he says, I'm a sultan and you're a sultan,
Mm,
and your being a sultan is dependent on a breath. And
mm,
likewise, my sultanate is dependent on a breath. But
mm,
when you breathe your last breath, your kingdom ends. No one's going to remember you. But
mm,
when I breathe my last breath, my kingdom begins. Because this is the spiritual kingdom.
mm,
It
mm,
comes from the infinite. So there is no end to this.
mm.
And yeah, so it's in Aflaki's version, and it is beautiful.
You know this part about Shams Tabrizi marrying the daughter of Rumi, because Shams Tabrizi is a lot older, no?
It's the
So in
stepdaughter of
terms of
Maulana.
the age gap, wasn't Tabrizi a lot older
There is
than
a
Maulana?
yeah, there is a huge age gap. There's a big age gap. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
We
so
don't
how?
know the exact ages, but there is. I mean, based on and it was not a happy marriage. So we know that from the Maqalat Shams, and you know, it ended in a divorce. So it was not a happy marriage. It didn't last
No,
long.
it's really interesting because
Hmm.
a lot of people are not aware that
Hmm.
Shams Tabrizi was married even. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Is associated with like being with Maulana, astaghfirullah, and you know, there's all of that other thing. So this is
Hmm. Hmm.
interesting. But does he get married again?
Uh, no,
Shams
as
Tabrizi.
much no, as far as I know, no.
Mhm.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. About just the two
Hmm.
comments. Sorry, about the marriage
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
Sayyidi Shams,
Hmm.
and about the traveling of Maulana. About Maulana's traveling is like when you read in everything he write spiritually, you found it's like something we call it ذوق, taste, spiritually tasting. He tastes something in Balkh, he tasting something in Baghdad, he tastes something in every, and he witnessing Allah and with different states. It's like a maqam in every country or every land. So it's important for any wali or any salik in general. And about the marriage, according what I read for Sayyidi Shamsi was actually look to the women just one gaze or a one. Most of awliya had, some of them, not all of them, they cannot have this chemistry to understand women. And about the ages or the different age, it's common at that time. At that time, many awliya like married, or not even awliya or saints, married at like a different age between the man and the woman, and it's common at that time, not like in our time. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. Yeah, we'll talk more about Shams-e Tabrizi, inshallah, as we go on. There's more on Shams. The family settles in. So after a while, they move again. A lot of moving here, you know, and that's why for Maulana traveling is so important. Maulana says if trees could flee, they would escape the axe. The reason trees get cut is because they don't move. And if water stays in one place for so long, it loses its freshness. And likewise, it is for human beings. You need to be constantly moving. And then Maulana says, "Wagar to paayi nadari, safar gozin dar khish." If you can't travel outwardly, travel within yourself at least. You always can do that. You always have the means to travel within yourself. به خوی خویش سفر کن، به خلق و خوی خدا. Journey from your own disposition to God's disposition. So that journeying, that inner journeying should always be with you. But yeah, the family is, Maulana is young and they're constantly moving from place to place. You see, they move to Neshabur and then Baghdad and then Laranda, and now they move to Konya because the Sultan of Rome, Alauddin Keykubat, personally invites Bahauddin, and he gives him the madrasa and is made the professor, the teacher in the madrasa in Konya. And the young Maulana, the young Jalaluddin, also starts learning. So he learns fiqh, he learns Arabic grammar, nahu, he learns the Quran, he learns hadith, fiqh, history, logic, philosophy, maths, astronomy. And if you read Maulana's works, if you read the Masnavi, you see that he had immense knowledge, of philosophy, of maths, of astronomy. He mentioned astronomical, and that was the knowledge that he acquired in the madrasa. And when Maulana's father dies, Bahauddin dies in 1231, Maulana is made the chief mufti. Maulana's mentor, so he's a disciple of his father, and he's also Maulana's mentor, Jalaluddin's mentor, arrives in Konya, and he starts teaching him as well and mentoring him. And this is Burhanuddin Muhaqqiq Tirmidhi, and he also has a book called Ma'arif. And again, he's one of the greatest influences on Maulana. And he has a lot of emphasis on fasting, a lot of emphasis on discipline, on spiritual discipline. So Burhanuddin sends young Maulana, young Rumi to Syria to study. And he studies in a madrasa called the Halawiya. And it's interesting because Maulana loved sweets so much, and he mentioned sweets so many times in his poems. And the school he studied in Syria, it's also called the school of sweetness. It's Halawiya, it's literally that's sweetness. And there are different theories. Some say that they would distribute sweets to students in this school. And after he studies there for actually 7 years, and then he comes back to Konya. And this is the tomb of Burhanuddin, that's Maulana's mentor. He dies in Kayseri, that's in Turkey. And this is the Madrasa al-Halawiya in Aleppo in Syria. And it's a really ancient building. And unfortunately, it was heavily damaged in the Syrian civil war. But, apparently the main structure remains. But walls and so on, it was severely damaged during the civil war in Syria.
Just to add this information, that the present day tomb of Maulana, the Rose Garden, was the land which was inherited or given to Sultan Walad, Maulana's father, and this is the present day how it was at that time given to him. And one part was a madrasa, the other for the living quarter as well, and where the sama used to take places in the evening after Isha prayer. Just for information, I'm just adding this extra information. So if whoever can go there, then they can see this is the whole cordon off area with a wall around it. Recently they put wall up, otherwise it was not a wall there before. And it's known as Rose Garden. And further, as you move from the Babe Gustakhan towards the tomb of Maulana, you will see the rest of the madrasa structure is there.
Just regarding these travels, I was also thinking these slow travels, because you have no other conveyance. You have to go by either probably camel or horse or whatever. So it's like a slow moving, and also you can talk, you can stay by the wayside somewhere, and then have a night like seeing travelers who are also on the way like that, and then meeting up with them. And then also you can't, whenever you reach a place, you'll stay for a while because it's a place where you have to rest and all. But here, nowadays, we are thinking of taking flights and just some stopovers or layovers or whatever you call it, maybe in some country or some place. And then for a brief while, you can't even probably go out of the airport or just meet anyone. You're busy with all your whatever details of things. So these travels and those travels were very different. And these travels of knowledge, like you mentioned, the Siru fil Arl and all that, Sayaha, that spiritual travel about which I think sister had mentioned regarding that zawq and that taste that you get from every place, and the halawa you mentioned about the sweetness you get from a place and you taste that for a while at least. That is, I think, taken away from us. I think we no longer have that grace or that barakah unless maybe from exceptional situations it may be there. This is probably also a bit of the sign of the times that we live in. The so-called advanced modes of transport and technology and speedy travel, but then the goal of that travel is not for knowledge and for illumination. That has become more and more probably difficult. I was thinking Maulana and his times were actually the times of blessing in comparison, I think, to modern times where speed has like dominated and convenience has been multiplied exponentially, but much has been lost, and what has been lost is probably precious and more valuable.
Totally. Yeah. Allah.
Brother Sina, would you please share again what you had shared about what Rumi said about traveling, the importance of travel, please?
Yes. So Maulana says, if trees could move, درخت اگر متحرک بودی ز جا به جا. If trees could move from place to place, they would not suffer the blows of the axe. And then he gives several examples. He gives, the water, the air. If the air stays in one place, what happens? If water stays in one place, what happens? And then he gives examples of different prophets, of Joseph, how he traveled, and he became in Canaan, and then he moved to Egypt, and so on, and how the prophet himself traveled. The Hijrah was the beginning, and so on. But then Maulana says, مگر تو پای نداری, if you don't have the feet, if you don't have the means to travel, سفر گزین در خویش, journey within yourself, travel within yourself. ز خلق خویش سفر کن به خلق و خوی خدا, from your own disposition, from your own qualities to the qualities of God. So that's the ultimate journey. We should all be journeying. The moment you stop moving, you fall. It's like riding a bicycle. You stop moving, you fall. You need to be constantly flowing.
That regarding the traveling within yourself, there is this term, I think the Naqshbandiya use, that safar dar watan. I travel in your journey, in your homeland. Obviously, that homeland means internal. And so I think they have made that kind of principle into a spiritual principle like that. I think Maulana is alluding to the same. Before it was probably systematized into those kind of terms and technical terms. And also regarding that verse that you mentioned regarding axe and the tree, I think it's like it strikes very hard in the sense from Maulana's life. He was like that. If he was there in that Balkh, he would have been cut down. It's literally cut down. These Mongols came and they massacred people, and they just blood flowed. Rivers of blood were flowing, and that cut down. So that instead of being, so he just had to. He left from that place, and then he was a great. I mean, he was like a tree that had so many fruits to give, and his roots were to be in another place where that tree had to grow. And I was thinking that.
Definitely. Allah.
It's more a question. In terms of traveling, does it mean like traveling to kind of see the world, or kind of immigrating, traveling, like, changing your homeland frequently? Yeah, I just wondered what it exactly meant here. It's different.
It can be both, or it can be neither. What Maulana means here is you need to be in motion, moving. Yes, right.
Yeah.
There has to be some. If you just do the same things every single day, go to work, come back, do the exact same. That's in Persian we call it rozmargi.
It's the kind of not getting stuck.
It's the kind of yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thank you.
Exactly. And in Maulana's time, the travel, as you said, you had to leave everything behind. It was not like modern travel. Now you book a plane and then you come back to your home, everything's the same as before, and you got air conditioning. No, in Maulana's time, you had to leave everything behind. You never knew when you're going to come back. You never knew what's going to happen on the way. So
kind of spiritual traveling as well.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Beautiful.
Regarding the word for travel, safar, in Arabic. I think in the work of Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi, there is I think, a Kitab al-Isfar, and in which it's mentioned that actually Isfar means suffer, also means unveiling, like unveiling the bride or unveiling a face. So that way it is like unveiling. So travel is a form of unveiling, or the sense, like somebody mentioned, the sister mentioned, regarding in each place there is this taste that is given. So it's the knowledge of unveiling. Obviously, the knowledge, kashf and dauk and all are, I think, related terms. The knowledge that is unveiled or to you in a place. That way, that suffer, that travel is far. And also, I was thinking also the English word travel. Suffer means suffering. Suffering, suffer as a form of suffering is just a pun that is came to mind.
Allah, Allah.
Yeah, if I may, yeah, actually, safar is the root is sin farra, which is to unveil, and before it was used for traveling, it was actually used unveiling knowledge. Like in philosophy books, they use safar as in, as I said, unveiling knowledge, like becoming less ignorant. Let's put it this way. So yeah, thank you for that. It's fascinating.
About the madrasa name and the safar or asfar. Because in Arabic it's had many names. Asfar, it's like many from safar, from traveling, walking, and but also from sifr. Sifr, like if you open the Holy Bible, the Al-Ahd al-Qadim, the old one, the Torah, we have like asfar. Sifr al-Takween, like the sifr mean also in Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describing كالحمار يحمل أسفارا, meaning books also. Asfar meaning books, and many of the Persian and Arabs, awliya, or even scholars used to for two meanings. Asfar meaning my traveling, and also my books, my knowledge. So, like this. And about the name of the school, Halawiya, it's got, you know, it's like in my mind I was like thinking like today about the three meanings of the تزكية النفس. التزكية تخلية تحلية. The third one تحلية, meaning like adornment. You make yourself خلاص, you know, like ending. You purifying yourself, then you empty yourself, then you adornment with the nur of the haqq. This is the meaning of the tahliya, and also it's part of the halawa, sweetness. You taste the sweetness of the nur of Allah. That's what I understand it.
Ayvallah, indeed, indeed. And you know that's why Maulana calls, you know, in his poems, metaphorically, he calls Allah the halwai, the halwa giver, the giver of the halwa. Says Bengar soy halwai ta ki talabi halwa. Look at the halwa seller, or look at the halwa giver. How long are you going to seek halwa? He's the source of sweetness. All sweetness comes from him.
Just also regarding Sifr, you mentioned, sister mentioned regarding Sifr as Asfara, the books. So, and in English, you mentioned the word Sifr, I think comes from that Sifr, S-E-I-P-H-E-R, Sifr. That actually comes, I think, from the same root. It's a cognate word, Sifr. Actually, it means a code. It also, I think, means zero. Sifr, zero. So that is a very interesting association. Zero in the sense of fakr and being nothing, kar, nisti, and sifr. And travel allows you to understand that, you know, sense that, you know, you journey to the homeland or whatever it could be called, safar, darwatan. And this sifr, this idea that it's a book too, the book of journey, books, and then like the Quran, the book. And then the zero idea, saying sifr, I have to check it. Sifr actually means code also. Sifr code. Some coded language is called sifr. And also it means, I think, has a connection with zero, or so that all those connections seem quite interesting.
So now we're going to get to Maulana's Safar dar Watan, or the revolution that happened in him. And that is through this person called Shamsuddin, who's called Shams-e Tabrizi. Now, then he was nicknamed Shams-e Parande, the flying Shams. the flyer, because he never stayed in one city. So obviously he was from Tabriz. They say that he was a disciple of one of the local Sufi sheikhs in Tabriz, Sheikh Abu Bakr al-Labaf, Abu Bakr the basket weaver. But then he moves from city to city. So he's not content. He's in search. He's looking. And he stays in the caravanserais. He stays, he wears the clothes of merchants and he stays in caravanserais. And he doesn't go to the khanaqahs, he doesn't go to the Sufi khanaqahs. He doesn't want to live off charity. He earns his living weaving baskets. He does manual labor. He teaches the Quran in schools. And he travels. He travels from place to place. Now he's looking for something that the world around him doesn't give him. Now he says in his maqalat, and that's the most valuable source when it comes to Shams's life. He says, my father, he was a rich man. He was, they had, merchants. They were merchants and so on. And he was telling me, you're not sane. You're not acting sensibly. And I told my father, I am like that duck which was raised by domestic chickens. And then one day that duck passes by the river and the duck jumps into the water and the chicken doesn't. And my homeland is the water. My homeland is the spiritual world. Whereas what you find joy in is other things. So you go your way, I go my way, and so on. But he also doesn't find what he's looking for. He says, the fuqaha, I went to sit with the fuqaha. I thought they had the knowledge, but they were all concerned with yajuz and la yajuz, what is permitted, what is not permitted. I went to sit with the philosophers, and then I realized, aql ta dehliz mibarad. Reason takes you to the door. It doesn't take you inside. It doesn't take you to the sanctuary. I went to sit with the Sufis, and then I realized, the fuqaha, the jurists, they were better because at least they had put themselves into trouble. They had learned something. But the Sufis of our time, or a lot of them, they didn't do even that. So he's looking for something. He's also searching. And in Maqalat, Shams says, I prayed to God. Show me one of your saints. مرا با اولیای خود اختلاط ده و هم صحبت کن. And then in my dream, I was told, we shall give you or grant you a saint as your companion, as your soul companion. And then I asked, where is this saint? Where can I find this saint? And I was told, in Rome, seek him in the land of Rome. And that's why I traveled to Rome, precisely to seek Maulana. Precisely to seek that saint which I was told about in the dream. And yes, he comes from miles away and he stays with the merchants. He wears the dress of merchants and so on. And now the meeting with Maulana. That's the story of the great meeting with Maulana. And it happens in Bazar Shakar Furushan, the sugar sellers marketplace in Konya. And Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi is 37 years old. He's the great scholar in the city. And he's coming from the madrasa, riding his donkey or his mule through the market, and he's surrounded by all the students and all the others, bodyguards, people around him. And then this man comes and grabs the reins of Maulana's mount. He takes the reins of Maulana's mule. And he asks this question, which is unusual. Khudam buzurgtar bud. Ba Yazid buzurgtar bud ya Muhammad? Who was greater, Ba Yazid or Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Now, Bayezid is one of the great Sufis of Khorasan, but how can you compare anyone to the Prophet? The Prophet is the source of all spirituality, of all wisdom, of everything. How can you compare anyone to the Prophet? And Maulana says, of course the Prophet. Chejaye Bayezid. You cannot even compare Bayezid to the Prophet. And then Shams continues with a follow-up question. He says, why is it then that Bayezid of Bastam, in his ecstatic utterances, these are called shatfiyat, ecstatic utterances, which should not be taken literally. They're said in ecstasy, because it's the divine that's speaking through them, not them. But why is it that Bayezid says, Subhani, glory be to me, how great am I, how Ana Sultan of Salatin, I am the king of kings. There's no one in my cloak except God. Why is it that Bayezid is saying such things? And Sayyidina Rasulullah is saying, Subhanaka, praise be to you. We did not know you as you deserve to be known. We did not worship you as you deserve to be worshipped. No one worships you as you deserve to be worshipped. No one can know you except you. No one can worship you except you. Why is it that the Prophet ﷺ, he's talking with such humility, and Bayezid is talking with that ecstasy and how great is my majesty and so on. And Maulana gives an answer. He says, because Bayezid, with that little, his cup was filled. And because his cup was filled, he said, glory be to me, and so on. But the Prophet, istisqai azim, he had thirst after thirst, after thirst, after thirst. He was always faqir. He was always seeking for more. He was not content. And now both of them realize the deeper aspect of this question. No matter where you are, you should always be thirsty. You should always be seeking. And, they say that Maulana fell unconscious, and after that they spent, some traditions, some versions, they say 5 days, some say 7 days, some say 40 days in seclusion together, and no one. So they had realized they had found what they were seeking. Maulana was seeking someone, as Sultan Walad said, تشنه بود و رو به دریا داشت. He was thirsty and he was looking for the ocean. He was great, but he was looking for higher heights. He was looking for the heights. So Maulana had that thirst and Shams had that thirst. So they realized they had found what they were seeking. And this is, as Sultan Walad, he says, his khizr became Shams-e Tabrizi. So he's comparing Maulana to Moses, and he says, خزرش بود شمس تبریزی آنکه با او اگر درآمیزی, the one with whom if you mingle, he will tear the veils of darkness, and you would not buy both worlds for a grain of barley. And he says Shams was one of those hidden saints. He was one of those hidden awliya. He was hidden from the common folk because people are the body and saints are the soul, and they could not see Shams because ghayrat haq, the jealousy of God, had kept Shams hidden. But because God loved Maulana, he showed the reality of Shams to him. He showed the presence of Shams to him, and that's why Maulana was so attached to this radiance and to this light. And Maulana says that's the effect of Shams. Sheikh Mufti, the Ishq Sha'ir. He was a jurist, he was a sheikh, a mufti, but he became a poet through love. And he was an ascetic. His path was asceticism, and then he became khammar, a drunkard. And then Sultan Walad says, not the wine that is pressed from wine, from grapes. Jan nuri nakhord juz may nur. A soul that is light, a luminous soul, drinks nothing but light. So it was another wine. It was the wine of light that Maulana drank. Now we're going to end today's session, and then inshallah we'll continue Maulana's life next week. But it's nice to end with a ghazal by Maulana. But yeah, this poem shows the transformation that Maulana went through when Shams came. It says, مرده بودم زنده شدم، گریه بودم خنده شدم، دولت عشق آمد و من دولت پاینده شدم. دیده سیر است مرا، جان دلیر است مرا، زهره شیر است مرا، زهره تابنده شدم. گفت که دیوانه نی، لایق این خانه نی، رفتم و دیوانه شدم، سلسله بندنده شدم. گفت که سرمست نی، رو که از این دست نی، رفتم و سرمست شدم و از طرب آکنده شدم. گفت که تو کشته نی، در طرب آغشته نی، پیش رخ زنده کنش کشته و افکنده شدم.
I was dead, I became alive. Dead I was, and I was made alive. I was weeping, and I was turned to laughter. The kingdom of love arrived, and I became that kingdom everlasting. My eyes are filled, my soul is bold. I have the lion's heart within me. I am become as Venus now, a star shining and bright. He said, "You are not mad. You are not fit for this dwelling." I went and became a madman, bound fast in iron chains. He said, "You are not yet intoxicated. You are not of this company." I went and became a drunkard, brimming with joy and delight. He said, "You are not yet slain, not yet drenched in ecstasy." Before his life-giving countenance, I fell down, slaughtered and cast aside. He said, "You are a little clever thing, drunk on fantasy and doubt." I became a fool, struck with awe. I was torn away from everything. He said, "You have become a candle, a qibla, towards which this crowd turns." I am no crowd. I am no candle. I am become but smoke, scattered and thin. He said, "You are a sheikh and a head, a guide, a leader of the path." I am no sheikh. I am no head. I am become but a servant to your word.
Yeah, so, Shams is telling Maulana, "You're a sheikh." And then Maulana immediately, "I am sheikh niyam. I'm not a sheikh. I'm nothing. I'm just scattered smoke." And then Maulana at the end of this ghazal, he says, "Zuhre budam mah shadam." I was Venus, I became the moon. Charkhe do sat tah shadam. I became like the heavens 200-fold. Yusuf budam. I was a Joseph in beauty. Yusuf zawiyande shadam. And now I will give birth to many Josephs. So this is how Shams transformed me. And you see the element of tarab, of joy and delight, that Shams brought to Maulana. The ecstasy, being drenched in ecstasy and becoming mad, becoming a madman. I went and I became a bad madman.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I guess Sheikh Rumi or Maulana was already at a very high spiritual level before he meets Shams Tabrizi. And it seems like he ascends to like a different level, and the power of how somebody can transform another person, and they're both human beings, and yeah, it's very amazing here, that interaction and transformation. I mean, I'm very touched. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Allah.
Because you mentioned the nickname of Shams as Parinda, I read it somewhere. This image came to mind that it's that Maulana is as if standing on a mountain, a peak. I mean, the whole horizon is before him, but he couldn't fly. Something was holding him back, and it required a bird to help another bird fly. Take flight. Everything else was there, ready, and everything was like the wings were ready and the legs, everything was power was there, all the knowledge was there, but this plunge, that was what was probably that he provided. As a bird he came and just flew with another birds of a feather flock together, and all they say in English too, that idea that they were of a feather and they flew together, and then that was the rest is history, as they say. That moment was like, in that moment also, I was thinking that in which he asks regarding this Bayezid's saying, I was just thinking that these kind of Sufi, so-called Sufi sayings, these things that obviously that's a provocative type of question regarding human perfection as manifested in the Prophet, the greatest, the most perfect, the most perfect versus other people who are also like holy, and this idea of sanctity and nubuwa and wilaya and all later discourses that were there. But that original moment that they could see, I mean, it was like a very, they felt it, they felt the impact of that. I think now, because they have all become, as many of them have become cliche, like, we have just been talking Sufi talk and all these books and various forms of classifications, and it seems to have like that immediacy of the moment, that hit, like the hard hitting talk seems like only exceptional, and mostly it is like a diluted version of that wine seems to have been very diluted to the extent that it's very, like, in our discourse has become quite that original this thing. So that sense of wonder, I was also thinking of the hadith of the Prophet regarding tahayyur. I think Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi quotes it often. Allahumma zidni fika tahayyura. And then also the Hayra as a great, as a big, as a very high station, I think, in the Fusus and in other places. I think Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi says Hayra as a great station, or rather a state. And also that in regarding Aristotle and all, said about the sense of wonder as the beginning of philosophy, and this sense of wonder, awe, or whatever. I like in this ghazal also, it comes through very clearly. I became awed, and then I just lost. Like I became a madman. I became intoxicated. This is what I think is often like difficult to recapture in today's times. And I think Maulana's words and these words that come to us may just hopefully rekindle that spark and then that burning. And it's still possible, obviously. I think it's still possible. It's only a matter of whether it is like prepared and how everything comes and just I mean, everything comes together. I think it's still very much possible.
Allah, indeed.
Yeah, I just had actually a question. Maulana was also known as Isfandiar, which wasn't he?
Khudavandigar, probably, or
Yeah,
Isfandiar.
Khudamandigar, but also Isfanyar, like a gift of God. Like this is from old Persian mythology. And I was just wondering if these names came after he met Shams, once he kind of woken up and people realized that he was, made of the spirit of God, or was it always? It's just, interesting that he has all these kind of nicknames.
Nicknames,
I don't
yeah.
know.
I mean, he was known as Maulana before he met Shams. Before he met Shams, he was the great scholar of the city, so they would call him Khudavandigar or Maulana. And Maulana is there are so many Maulanas, or Maulavis. Any, Imam is called Maulana. But anytime we say Maulana and there's nothing after that, we mean Maulana Jalaluddin. Like Masnavi, there are hundreds of Masnavis written, but anytime you say the Masnavi, it's the Masnavi of Maulana. But yeah, like Khudavandigar is like, or Khudavandigar or Maulana. It was just basically many people were called that and are called that. Yeah, but anytime nothing is mentioned, it's just Maulavi or Maulana. Okay. It's Maulana.
About the brother Ashfaq said about the Hayra. And before I was, it's two things. About the Hayra, it's actually the middle and like a base maqam or state between the abd or faqr, ubudiyya, and the faqr, and the highest maqam. I think Maulana, he had many nicknames and he was the scholar, a famous scholar, but he was in this Hayra of according to Sayyidi Ibn Arabi, al-Rusum. He described the people, the scholar of the fiqh and the rusum, meaning the people that stand about the outside, not the inside.
Uh-huh.
So I think he was in this hayra, and this like I don't like something I want someone took my soul, took me from the cage. I think Sayyidi Shams is one of the son that
Uh-huh.
took him.
Uh-huh.
And even when the wali, any saint, even reach to the meaning and the answers, the root will be in the hayra. That's even Sayyidi Sultan al-Ashiqeen Umar ibn al-Farid, he said زدني بفرط الحب فيك تحيرا. And
Allah.
some said that this belonged to Sayyidina Zayn al-Abidin al-Sajjad.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
اللهم زدني فيك تحيرا. That that's only in Allah, because and also Allah it's give reflection and also the creation. Confused what that meaning. I am in the feeling is like burning, like I am in the heaven and I am in the hell. You are in it's like standing here and there. That's the burning inside any wali. That's why that give and bring these spiritual poems. And second part about the poem, for me, it's the one of the favorite actually for Maulana, especially the part of when he said Sheikh Niyam, Peace Niyam, Amri Torah, Band Shudam. Yeah, he is like give the short, like short word or shortcut for all the whole, journey. Like I noted in Arabic also قيل أنا شمعة قطبا لذا المجلس وما أنا شيخ وما أنا زعيم أبدي بل خادم مطيع. I am a servant. The road for Allah, the holy. You are not servant. You are not a wali. You are not a sheikh. You are not a leader. You are just a servant. You serve all the creation. He give like everything. Give you like everything on. Give the answer actually.
Allah. Thank you. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, because you didn't really mention about Shams Tabrizi, just you said that he was a merchant's son, and like about his education, I wanted to ask if you know anything about it. Like, yeah, how you said Maulana was like already a great scholar and so much, and I just want to know how much like the education of Tabriz was that he just like when Maulana looked at him and he just looked upon him and great discussion.
Not much is known, to be honest. Now, there was this perception that Shams was just this wandering dervish and so on. Now, if you read the maqalat of Shams, obviously he knows much. He knows he knows the hadith, he knows Quran, he knows some philosophy. So he has met great people. So you can get that from maqalat of Shams. And he says that he had the teacher in Tabriz, Abu Bakr al-Labaf, or Abu Bakr, the basket weaver in Tasawwuf. He was his immediate sheikh. But then he was not content with that. So he travels to Syria. He could have met Ibn Arabi, even Maulana himself when he was in Syria. So it was the time that Sidi Muhyiddin ibn Arabi was also in Syria. So there is a possibility of a meeting.
Yes, in the current times, as Brother Shwak mentioned, we are taking a flight, quick journeys. In no time, we are traveling long distances. But if you put back the clock and go back to the 11th, 12th century, and you will find a different way of life, different exposure, or different aims of people who travel. So traveling is, or suffer, suffer is always a very good way of learning things about, distance, etc. So if you go to Konya, there is a museum, Turkish authorities have made called Panorama Museum. If you go there, on top of the spiral there, they have depicted the life of the time of Maulana, in a very nice way. So it's just information I'm sharing that if anybody travels to Konya, must not miss the visit to Panorama Museum to understand what was the life like at the time in that era, what challenges faced Muslims or Maulana or the people of the tribe who survived that time as well. So on one side you have Mongols, the other side you have Sultan of Rome.
So yeah, inshallah, next week we're going to continue Maulana's life story and how Hazrat Shams disappears and how Maulana sends his own son in search of Shams, and then how Hazrat Shams disappears again, and the rest of Maulana's story. Inshallah, we'll continue that next week.